The Edmonton Oilers really should have won that hockey game. Let's sift through the debris.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I'm your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone that is making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your teams covered every single day, and Locked On is the number one streamed sports podcasting network. On today's show, we are going to walk through the 6-5 overtime loss to the Utah Mammoth. We're going to start out talking about why that was a missed opportunity, a game that was frustrating, that really should have been a win for the Oilers. In our second segment, we will talk about the perceived defensive improvements, how realistic our collective perception of the team's defense has been over the last 3 weeks or so, as Paul Coffey has implemented some of the changes, as Connor Murphy has been fully integrated. And then to tie a bow on our show, we will continue with our overall theme about the team's defense, talking about Jake Walman, a player I am very bullish on based on the previous 5 years of his NHL career, but this year has left something to be desired and still has a 7-year deal on the horizon that kicks in this upcoming season in the fall. So there's a lot to get to. And without further ado, I hate to be that guy, but the Oilers at one point or another were leading this game 2-1, 3-1, 3-2, 4-3, and 5-4. The Oilers held 5 different leads in this game. This is exactly the type of performance you want to see the Oilers putting on the scoreboard, at least offensively, going into the playoffs, because putting up 5 goals without Leon Draisaitl in the mix and with the power play at large struggling over the last 3 weeks in Draisaitl's absence, to put up 5 goals, that's an accomplishment. That should feel like a win within the context of a given game. We have talked all season long here on Locked On Oilers, and my everydayers know our magic number is 4. If the Oilers score 4 goals, they are almost assuredly going to win that hockey game. Getting there when you have the bottom 6 the Oilers do, and the power play over the last few weeks, which has gone cold in the absence of Draisaitl, although they did score on the power play tonight on a superb effort from Connor McDavid. I bring all of that up in the context of this individual game because though the Oilers had a clunky and at times outright disjointed effort, I thought probably the worst game from Evan Bouchard in a while. And look, you guys know I am as staunch a Bouchard defender as it comes, but some of the turnovers tonight were pretty rough. The one in the defensive zone where he effectively deflected the puck away as opposed to getting a handle on it and settling it down, which ultimately set up a Utah goal, was really tough. And there was something funky about this game where even though the Oilers were out to all of those different leads, I didn't have the same sense of assurance I'd had over the last few weeks when the Oilers were playing with leads. And that's largely tied to the type of team Utah is. I like a lot of the individual players on Utah. We'll see how good Logan Cooley ultimately becomes. He's a pretty talented hockey player. He made the key play in overtime, forcing Savoie to take that penalty. I think I understand why Savoie reacted the way he did, where he said something along the lines of, that is so bleeping bad, because Logan Cooley's got 15 pounds on him and a couple inches. In Savoie's mind, the larger man went down a little bit easy, and we know Savoie isn't exactly the biggest dude. So I get the frustration. I thought Savoie had a really noticeable game. I think other than McDavid, Savoie was probably the Oilers' best player out there tonight, especially up front. And in the greater context, the Oilers had won 5 of their last 6. They were 2-0 against Utah already this season. They had scored 11 goals in the previous 2 games against Utah, which leads you to believe that this is at least a team that they are somewhat comfortable playing against because of the offensive opportunities they're going to get. And what really frustrates me and why I harp on this being a winnable game, they gave up a goal a minute 50 in. The goal that Peterka scores is a brain fart. The puck gets to that corner. So if you're looking at the TV screen, the puck is bottom right of the screen. JJ Peterka makes a nice play. He wins inside leverage. He keeps that puck moving, and he stays in that general area. He glides slightly over to the bottom right circle, and he's sitting there, stick up, waiting for the one-timer. And there are a lot of things to get on Tristan Jarry's case for. I have been beyond underwhelmed with his performance as an Oiler, but that's going completely opposite post to post off of a cross seam pass with no defensive help. I can at the very least give Tristan Jarry somewhat of some grace for letting that goal in. Peterka's got a really hard shot, and a defensive letdown makes that as good of a shot as it ultimately turns out to be. I really wish Jarry could have gotten in the way. I wish Jake Walman could have been in the way, but you give up that goal a minute and change into the game, you're starting to feel a little antsy. You know, the Oilers this year, they're 10-24-4 in games when the other team scores first. And that's not unique to the Oilers. There are very few teams in the NHL who have decent records when they don't score first, because hockey at large is such a score impacts driven game, and that really dictates the flow of the game. And then the Oilers get a gift. Lazar scores a goal a minute and change later, and less than a minute later, all of 20 seconds later, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, okay, we made a bad defensive mistake, but our depth picked us up. We get to feel good about this. We're right back in this. It's 1-1. It's just like we're starting from scratch. And then we score 2 straight, and we are winning this game 3-1 after the first period, and the Oilers have a really good record when leading after one period, leading by multiple goals. You think to yourself, over the last few weeks, the team has played significantly better defense. They've done a strong job of playing puck possession, of grinding games down, especially with no Draisaitl, especially with no Hyman. We're going to keep things simple. We're going to play it safe. And Utah have wanted no part of that. And credit to Utah, who has a lot of guys. Dylan Guenther, who continues to impress me every single time I watch him. The aforementioned Peterka, who hasn't had as good of a season in Utah, maybe as a lot of people, including me, frankly, thought he might have coming off of the year he had in Buffalo last year. But when you get goals from Lazar, Podkolzin, and Colton Dach, who returned to the lineup today, first game for him since early March, I am really happy that you are getting those contributions. I think Lazar, for a effectively league minimum, has been a really solid find on that fourth line. Podkolzin continues to astound me. We'll see if he can hit that 20-goal mark. He's in the ballpark with 4 games to go. That's extremely exciting. And to be fair, the Oilers picked up Tristan Jarry in this game. Tristan Jarry did not play great. A lot of the goals were byproducts of pre-shot movement, traffic, and things that are out of his control. But the Oilers scored 5. Anytime you score 5 goals in an NHL game, you should feel reasonably comfortable in your team winning that game. And the individual efforts tonight, you think about the plays Matthias Ekholm made in transition, the back checking. I thought at large, the Oilers did a decent job, but we're talking about a handful of mistakes. And the final thought I'll leave you with in this opening segment. So right now, as I am recording this episode, the Ducks are losing. It was 5-0 last time I looked. I'll check again real quick while we're recording, just to make sure to see if that game has gone final. And yes, the Predators beat the Ducks 5-0. So these standings are accurate as of the moment. Let me just make sure Vegas is done as well. Yes, Vegas beat Vancouver. Okay, so as of the moment of this recording, the Oilers have 88 points, the Ducks have 87, the Golden Knights have 86. Anaheim and Vegas both have one game in hand on Edmonton. Anaheim has a .001 better points percentage than the Oilers, and they have 5 games remaining. This is going to be probably a last game of the season situation, but we are going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we return, we will dive into the underlying defensive improvements under Paul Coffey, the penalty kill in particular, which has been a couple percentage points better, and a whole lot more right after this. There is nothing like being in the arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part's not always so simple. That's where our friends at Game Time come in as the go-to app for scoring tickets fast, without any of the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with you, the fans. Anytime you pull up the Game Time app, you are treated to some of the best in-class ticket buying experience features. All-in pricing up front, no surprise fees at checkout. My personal favorite, the panoramic seat view, where they show you the view of the game in your seat in the app before you buy them, so there are no surprises when you get there on game day. There are great last-minute options with tickets showing up at solid prices the closer you get to the start of the game. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDON and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. One more time, that's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's gametime.co, not .com on desktop. Thank you so much to everybody who is hanging out on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers as we are making our way through the stretch run of the regular season. And if you're not in the Everydayer Club Discord server cutting it up about the Oilers, I don't know what you're doing at this point. The link's down in the show notes. Couple bucks, get in the Discord server, get access to me, all the other Locked On hosts, and if you're an audio listener, you can get ad-free episodes of the show on your preferred audio podcast platform. So, continuing our conversation, I, for one, worry about teams that lean on their defense and their goaltending when it comes to the postseason. The NHL playoffs at this point in time, with where the game is at, where save percentages are as low as they have been in the contemporary NHL over the last 20 years this year, we are watching not just a skill revolution where the players are faster and better shooters and more skilled than ever. They are capable of doing things that guys 10 years ago could not do. You think about the roster composition of the average NHL team 10 years ago. You think about what the fourth line of those teams looks like. You think about guys like Tanner Glass. You think about guys like Zach Kassian. You think about players who in today's game would look out of their depth, even in those small of roles. You think about how guys like Ryan Reeves are effectively only in the NHL because the Sharks are tokenly keeping him in the NHL. That enforcer archetype does not exist anymore in the same way that even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, every team had one or two. There were teams that had like three. But beyond Nick Delorier, we're talking about a handful of guys across the entire league. And I bring that up not because I don't think there's value, but I bring that up because in the game today, we are trying to find the most consistent way to win. And relying on defense, relying on goaltending is a challenging way to win because it's a precondition for a less advantageous game situation. Now, there are teams that can consistently win on strong goaltending. When you have an Igor Shesterkin, an Andrei Vasilevsky, Jake Ottinger's not having a good statistical season this year, but based on the aggregate of his career, I would say Jake Ottinger counts. Jeremy Swayman this year has been really good for the Bruins. But unless you're one of those upper echelon guys, Ilya Sorokin, I know the Islanders aren't in a playoff spot as of the time of this recording in the wee hours of Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, but when you have one of those guys who is the best or second or third best player on your team, you can expect them to play above the environment in front of them to some degree. And we have been hammering the drum all year here on Locked On Oilers. The defense has to be better. The defense has to be better. When it was the Calvin Pickard and Stuart Skinner tandem before the trades, the defense and the offense both needed to be better because we could not reasonably expect that goalie tandem to carry a significant amount of the load to win games. For 2 years, the first 2 seasons-ish of me doing the show, this is my 3rd season doing the show. We're coming up on my 3rd year anniversary, actually, as a matter of fact. When we talk about it in that lens, the recurring sentiment was, if the difference between winning and losing is Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard, the Oilers will lose. Right now, the same rings true here. If the difference between winning and losing is Tristan Jarry or Connor Ingram, the Oilers more likely than not will lose. And they don't have the depth in front of those guys that they've had in years past to maybe make the outlying responsibility just a little bit easier. But you have the Paul Coffey factor in play. You add Connor Murphy, you add Jason Dickinson. You add a reinforcement to defensive principles. They talked about it quite a bit on the broadcast. highlighting the center being a little bit deeper in the defensive zone, being a bit more active in trying to break up that center lane pass. That has a trickle-down effect to offense. That makes the first breakout pass a little bit easier. They highlighted it on one of the transition plays that set up, got a really good scoring chance out of it, the Nuge goal, where Kapanen makes the really nice defensive play. He knocks the puck out of the air to himself, the little self-pass, gets it up to Nuge. Nuge skates it through the neutral zone, loses the puck just a little bit, loses control, still gets the shot on net and beats Karel Vejmelka. I bring that up because the conversation on social today, and I know social is largely dictated by a handful of conversation starters, anytime stats on the radio call-ins, anytime someone writes an article and stats get pulled, one of the proprietary statistic companies has the Oilers as being one of the best defensive teams in terms of high danger chances against since Paul Coffey came back at the end of February post-Olympic break. And new coaching voice bump, definitely real. You look across the board, there is generally a commiserate reaction from the team when a new coach comes in. I think the fact that Coffey has basically universal buy-in from his time as a player is one of the best defensemen to ever do it. I think the fact that pretty much everybody in this defensive group to some degree has familiarity and experience working with him only makes that buy-in a little bit easier. And I always go back to, it's a very corny cliche they use in the military and training, but smooth is fast, fast is smooth. And when you watch defenses play well, the defenders are moving effortlessly, seamlessly, and they are very smooth and they're capable of playing very fast. And when you go under the hood, the numbers are not crazy different with Paul Coffey behind the bench versus not. You think about it. So 483 points percentage in the games leading up to the return from the Olympics. In the game since, 579 points percentage, not including the loss to Utah, which overtime lost. 27.01 shots on goal against per game. In the games with Paul Coffey, 26.89. So we're talking 0.012 points percentage better there. Goals against, 0.003 less, 3.34 before Coffey, 3.31 with Coffey. Under the hood, they're giving up slightly more scoring chances against and shots on goal and goals, but they are giving up a quarter less expected goals per game, and they're giving up about one fewer high danger chance per 60 minutes. The quality chances are what sticks out. The save percentage is down just a smidge, about 0.001%, which can offset some of the goal scoring quandary as to why, even though we're perceiving them as playing better defense, the goal scoring isn't noticeably different for or against. The power play has been about 2 points better, 79.59 versus 77.5. That's great. All of this is to say, the Oilers have modestly improved. And when we talk about just in terms of goal share, the first 50-odd games before Paul Coffey gets hired, they have a 50.5 goal share, all situations, special teams, and even strength. With Paul Coffey in the fold, 51.5%. So about 1% better in terms of goal share. Now, that's not huge. That is not a massive jump. That's not what we saw last year when the Blues hired Jim Montgomery, but it's a noticeable improvement. They are giving up slightly fewer high danger chances and slightly fewer scoring chances of high expected goal quality per game. That's noticeable over a 10, 15 game sample that we have with Coffey behind the bench. We are going to take our second break on today's edition of Locked On Oilers. When we return, we'll dive into the question of Jake Walman's season and whether or not this is the outlier or if the Oilers are going to have almost immediate buyer's remorse right after this. Spring is a natural reset point. And if there's one thing that can quietly cost businesses money, it's messy communication. Missed calls, scattered texts, no clear thread of who said what. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2 with over 3,000 reviews trusted by more than 90,000 businesses. It lets your entire team share one business number so you never miss a call, text, or opportunity. The part I love, everything lives in one clear thread, calls, texts, and voicemails. The whole team sees the conversation, so nothing falls through the cracks. And the AI summary saves serious time by logging calls and highlighting next steps automatically. Makes your business feel more organized and more responsive. Make this the season. No opportunity and no customer slip away. Try Quo free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedonnhl. That's quo.com/lockedonnhl. Quo. No missed calls, no missed customers. Thank you so much to everybody that is hanging out on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers, making it their first listen of the day. And when it comes to Jake Walman, this is a player I like the toolbox a lot. This is a player who has really been shoehorned and pigeonholed at various stages of his NHL career because of his skill set. I don't really think Ty Emberson is really the optimal partner for him. And I like both Walman and Emberson's skill sets separately. I think Emberson has done a really nice job in what's effectively his second full NHL season, even though he's in his mid-20s. I think Emberson does have more meat on the bone to get. I don't know if it'll be with Edmonton. I could see a world where the Oilers look to upgrade at that spot in the not so distant future, even though Emberson is really cheap and gives them pretty good value for what he does. But Walman and Emberson, they really struggle below the goal line. They both really struggle around the net front. And that was really emblematic in the game on Tuesday against Utah, where they were noticeably the worst defensive pair the Oilers had in the game. And even before I had decided I wanted to talk about Walman, I did not get a great feel for that pair in this game. They were outscored 3-1 at even strength in their minutes tonight. And it's ugly. The Utah has 27 scoring chances to Edmonton's 11. Shots, it's better. It's 11 Utah shots to 9 Edmonton shots. That's passable. I said they outscored 3-1. They're out expected goal 1.2 to 5.52. So they're more than doubled expected goal. And then they are doubled in high danger chances 4-2 as well. Utah thoroughly controls the game when they're out there. And that's at least in part because of the trickle-down effect of the injuries up front. Without Zach Hyman, without Leon Draisaitl, transition play becomes more challenging. When other teams have the knowledge, for lack of a better word, when they know you're limited in terms of what you can do to break out, they're going to jailbreak on the forecheck. They are going to go out of their way to get pucks in deep, to force you to play defense, and Utah loves to live off the rush. And they did a really nice job of following up, of creating second and third chances off of those initial rush chances. And the reason I wanted to talk about Walman on today's show, I have been really hard on Darnell Nurse this year. This has probably been the tipping point. And I do think the larger Edmonton media apparatus beginning to come around to the idea that Nurse might not be a part of the team's future past this year, or at the very least could entertain the idea of the team asking Nurse to waive his no trade clause. I think there's a world where that could happen, and that would greatly help the Oilers, freeing up $9.25 million cap space. And I'll be honest, I look at Walman with rose-tinted glasses. He is the exact type of skill set that I eat the cheese on. The puck-moving defenseman with the hard shot, the good offensive instincts, who has a little bit of flair, a little bit of flash to his game, the exact type of player that the NHL has typically under-platformed, and it's part of why Walman at this stage of his career has only played 300, 400 games, which is crazy for a guy who's 30 years old and has bounced around. He's been on bad teams. It'd be one thing if this was the 6th or 7th defenseman on like the Dynasty Lightning who was only getting in 30 or 40 games per year. Jake Walman is 30 years old and he averages 52 games per year. And like I said, there are years in there where he was a 6th, 7th defenseman, a fringe guy. He's had a lot of injuries in his career this year. He's only played 48 out of a possible 77 games, 62%. His career average, like I said, is 52 games per year. Jake Walman has never played more than 65 games in a season. 65 games is his career high. And I go back to, I forget if it's a Bill Belichick or if it's a Bill Parcells. They're both from the same discipline. Belichick was a Parcells assistant at one point or another. Injured guys stay injured. And it's true in football. It's true in hockey. Guys who are consistently injured, even if it's not the same injury over and over again, because you get injured once, you are going to compensate for that injury. And whether you move differently, you skate differently, you approach taking or giving contact differently, it's going to compromise something else. You think about walking with a limp, putting more pronounced weight on a different part of your body, how your body compensates for that. It's a small anecdotal example, but think about that to the umpteenth degree on a professional athlete at the highest possible level in the most high stakes. And this year, with Walman on the ice, the Oilers have been outscored 47-35. With Nurse, they've been outscored 21-19. With Spencer Stastny, 8-2, part of why we haven't seen Stastny draw back in. And then with Ty Emberson going into tonight's game, they'd been outscored 4-3. Now that number up to 7-5, which not great. Walman is supposed to be the boutique. Walman is supposed to be the gravy on top. That the Oilers are so deep on their back end. They have a second high-end puck mover, somebody who could quarterback a second power play, that in end-of-game situations could jump up to that first pair with Evan Bouchard to help amplify offensive game situations, to help try and find that extra goal. You think about the work that Walman and Bouchard were able to do in spurts last year. You think about the work that Jake Walman and John Klingberg, who came off the couch in mid-January off that double hip surgery, played a handful of games, looked pretty bad, came back at the end of the regular season, jumped into the lineup in the playoffs, and him and Walman were lights out through the first 3 rounds. And at this point, man, I'm really worried about that Jake Walman extension kicking in. You can be patient in terms of knowing he's been injured. He's probably playing injured right now just so he could stay in the lineup. But at the same time, Walman has a 7-year contract worth $7 million per year that goes into effect this upcoming summer. For somebody who has been their 5th best defenseman, that is a massive, massive cause for concern when you think about the fact that they're going to have almost $30 million tied up just between Nurse, Bouchard, and Walman, mid-20s for those 3 guys. Ekholm's still going to be here. The Oilers are going to have a pretty expensive defense, and Jake Walman, his inability to stay healthy is a cause for concern. The fact 48% of the scoring chances, 50% of the shots on goal, 46% of the goals, 44% of the high danger chances. That's pretty concerning. Those are not good numbers. And this is somebody who is playing in a sheltered role, who's playing second or third pair. They are not asking him to play the most difficult of matchups. Now, can we add context and say he played a lot with Darnell Nurse this year? Nurse is still his most common partner, and Nurse has had a tough year, of course. But him and Emberson haven't been much better. So I think there's a real red flag here that the Oilers need a lot more out of Walman. Ekholm and Bouchard are doing their part. Bouchard was not great on Tuesday. 3 pretty glaring turnovers, still had a couple points, which is great. You want to see this defense really round back into form. So what we talked about in that second segment is a little bit less on the margins and more of an active impact. That'll do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much to everybody that made Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Join the Everydayer Club. The link's down in the show notes. Cost you a couple bucks. Get in the mix for the playoffs, where I'll be watching every game in there, giving instant reactions, words are hard, and answering questions as the games go along. Get ad-free episodes of the show. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NHL Game Night. Catch up on the out-of-town scoreboard so you know everything you need to know about the Pacific Division playoff race. If you're watching over on YouTube, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On YouTube channel. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.